Hello, and welcome to another video on GCSE revision with Mr. Whitehouse Explains. I'm hoping that this video will help you with a particular question that I think is one that could come up in the 2019 examination. The question is on the Cold War paper, or as it's officially called, the Conflicts and Tension 1945-1972 East and West, which you'll see on paper 1, which will be sat on the 3rd of June 2019. Now, this question is the question that's at the end of this conflict and tension East and West part of the paper, and it's a 16-mark question which would go, in my opinion, potentially something like this. The main reason for the increase in tension between the superpowers in the 1940s was the actions of the USSR. So I'll repeat that. The main reason for the increase in tension in the Cold War, or between the two superpowers in the 1940s, was the actions of the USSR. Do you agree? And what you have to do for this question is you have to have a paragraph or two on the reasons why the USSR had caused increased tension in the Cold War in the 1940s, and then a paragraph or two on why the USA increased tension in the 1940s in the Cold War, and then a conclusion at the end to say which one was the most important. Be careful, make sure you're looking at the date in the question, only use evidence that goes up to that date. So, to start off with, we'd have a paragraph on why the USSR's actions were important. And I guess you could talk about one of two things here. If you have time, you could talk about both. The first thing is the fact that Stalin broke promises at Yalta and Potsdam. Now, these promises were around the promise to hold free elections in Poland. Now, what Stalin actually did was that free elections were not held in Poland, and in countries in Eastern Europe, communist governments were set up. This increased tension, and this is the key thing you need to make sure you're explaining, because it led to the suspicion from the USA that the USSR was trying to be aggressive and spread communism across the world. Now, this fear of the spread of communism led to a Red Scare in America, led to McCarthyism, and led to a desire to try and restrict the amount of countries that were turning communist. This manifested itself in the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. So what you would say is that Stalin's broken promises, and by not holding free elections in Poland, led to the USA believing the USSR was being aggressive, which led to the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan, which led to further incidences of crises in the Cold War. If you were talking about how Stalin increased tension through the Berlin blockade, what you would do is you'd say that Stalin was responsible for cutting road, rail and canal links from the western sectors of Berlin to the western sectors of Germany. By doing this, he was trying to starve the population of West Berlin into East Berlin and to force the Allies out. This in itself is an aggressive move, but you could say that this led to the first major crisis of the Cold War, but also led to the formal division of Germany. And finally, it led to the formation of NATO and therefore the Warsaw Pact, which was two armed alliances against each other. So the war went from being one of ideology or ideas to one where actually war could end up happening between two big blocks of countries. Now, you would then need to talk about the other side of the argument, that the USA was more responsible for increased tension in the 1940s. And you could go along the same route about broken promises that you had done with the USSR, except the USA's broken promises and Truman's broken promises at Yalta and Potsdam were specifically related to the atomic bomb. Truman had not told Stalin about the atomic bomb, and this led to tension in two different ways. The first is that Stalin felt threatened because he felt the bomb could be used on him and the USSR, and the second is that Stalin wanted to take part in the war against Japan for the reasons of having some of the land that Japan had taken during World War II. By using the atomic bomb against Japan in 1945, the USA and Truman had robbed Stalin of the chance to increase his control over Asia. The second point you could make is that by actually setting up the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan, it led to the Soviet Union having a response to that action. And in fact, the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan was an overreaction, and that Stalin, in fact, all he was trying to do by setting up communist countries in countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, was to create a buffer zone to prevent a further invasion of the USSR, as it happened twice in the past 20 years in both world wars. So in fact, by setting up the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, it led to further aggression by the Soviet Union because Stalin felt threatened. He called the Truman Doctrine a declaration of war. The Marshall Plan was dollar imperialism, which literally means using the dollar to try and spread empire across the world. So these two arguments, both on the USA and USSR side, you need to try and fit those together in a conclusion. And you would do this by trying to link one to the other. So an example might be that you could say that USSR was the more responsible for increased tension in the 1940s, as by spreading communism into Eastern Europe, it provoked the USA to pass the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, which in return led to the Berlin blockade, the first major crisis in the Cold War. So by showing that you can link together the events, you're not only demonstrating your historical skills of analysis, but also your deep knowledge of the period. And those are the kind of details that examiners are going to be looking for when they award the top marks in your paper. Okay, I hope you found this video useful. Hopefully we'll put some more together over the course of the next couple of weeks, and wish you all the best in your exams coming up.